I'm the executive director at C4, and we've got members of our certified Ethereum professional committee with us today. So let's start with intros. Sonal, you want to start?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonal. I'm CEO and co-founder at Interweave Technologies, where we're working on leveraging zero knowledge and zkVM for enterprise use cases. And Dustin, I'll hand to you.
Hi, I'm Dustin. I'm the education manager at C4. Kent.
Hi guys, Kent Barton here, longtime Ethereum community member, founder of the Ethereum Denver community and ETH Denver steward, proud member of the CEP. The ETH Denver stuff will figure heavily into our conversation shortly.
Hey, that leaves me. I'm Josh. I'm one of the board members of C4, member of this wonderful CEP committee, and I get to build Web3 games every day. So lots of fun in the crypto space.
Okay, cool. So we obviously all love Ethereum. I feel like that's been made pretty clear over the past few years. And one of the things we love about it is that it is actually practical. It's not just something that sits out there that can't be used, but there are challenges that come along with any type of new technology and types of use cases. And so there have been things along the way that have derailed different things that we are excited about. There have been things that have been super positive and worked really well. And I think this is something with any type of new technology. So we're going to break down some of these use cases. We're going to talk about beer. We're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about certifications, all kinds of good stuff. So what we'll start with is music. And Josh is going to be talking to you a little bit about somebody named Grizz. Want to get into it, Josh?
Yeah, let's do it. So ticketing is something we'll actually touch on quite a bit. And there's different scales of ticketing. You know, there's full venues, making sure every single attendee has something. But there's also like really interesting, kind of more very specific, or at least small scale when it comes to ticketing as well, which is using something like an NFT to provide something extra to certain fans. There's one person that we know who has a lifetime Grizz ticket. So they actually purchase this NFT that allows them to go to absolutely any Grizz show that they want. Now, they're a big fan, which is obviously why they bought it in the first place. And they've used it several times. So they can actually use their NFT as proof to redeem a ticket for any of these shows that come up. So it doesn't, add complexity at the door. They don't have to show, oh, well, I have this NFT, and the person has to believe them and understand what's going on. Instead, there's a redemption system where every time they want a ticket to that event, they can just use that to actually, redeem that ticket and use it. Now, if, perhaps down the road, Grizz goes a different direction and they no longer like the music, or perhaps they're just done with, that style of show and moving on from that ticket. It's still an NFT. It's still transferable. It's transferable on any market that supports it. So now they have that ability to sell that and transfer that to someone else who might want it. Or with the all these other features that are kind of building on, and this is what you say, it's all like Lego bricks as far as finance sometimes, but it's Lego bricks and other terms too. Maybe they want to lend out this ticket for a year and then get it back. So they might actually decide, well, this year I'm traveling, I won't have time to go visit the shows. So they'll actually lend the token to someone. That way that person can redeem it and enjoy that show. So there's all sorts of fun stuff that can happen just from this one concept of, hey, I'm a big fan. I want to, purchase this keepsake, this NFT that grants me something specific. The artist wins out because they get a big lump sum, and then the fan gets to win out by always getting to see their artist, or moving along if they want to. So I just think that's a really interesting, tangible use case for this technology, and I'm sure we'll see, if we haven't already, more and more artists touching on this kind of thing.
So just to kind of build on that really briefly, get a sense for the opportunity for Web3 and crypto in the music space. A week or two ago, there were some revelations about Snoop Dogg. He went on an interview. He said, "I have a song that has like 1 billion views, or I'm sorry, 1 billion listens on Spotify. Because if you're Snoop Dogg, hell yeah, you're getting a lot of listens. So you would think 1 billion views or listens on Spotify, that's a lot of listens. You're going to get compensated for that." He got something like $45,000 for 1 billion listens. So, clearly like something is wrong in the music business in terms of actual artists getting paid, even established ones, not to mention indie artists. So this is another idea, it kind of plays into what Josh was talking about, but also just the idea of NFTs, being able to mint NFTs for your work and, getting paid directly, cutting out the middlemen, because the music business is a nasty place for creators. It's similar with artists. So these use cases are happening now, and I think they're going to get even more prominent as things like royalties going to kind of get hashed out in the crypto sense.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what this technology can do. And we see when you were talking, Josh, about the ticketing and being able to share with somebody else, made me think of when you go to a concert now and you've got some type of app and you can maybe transfer the ticket, but half the time it doesn't work, or you're not sure which app, because there's so many different apps. To be able to have the power to say, this is in my wallet, I chose which wallet, I'm responsible for the information, rather than relying on the people who have created this app out of, maybe, well, who knows what they've done, but it can often be problematic. I don't know about you guys, but I've been to concerts before where I've had problems with my ticket. And it'd be nice to know it's like in a wallet that I feel comfortable with and have chosen based upon what kind of research I've done.
I've been denied at the door because the ticket I bought through, one of these official resellers was fraudulent. So here I am, you buy from StubHub, which is connected to Ticketmaster, and somehow they don't have the way to also make sure that these tickets are legitimate sometimes. So having something that actually ensures what I purchase would be nice.
Yeah, I actually waited outside of a concert for like an hour for the ticket to load because I purchased it through one of those platforms, and a person has to manually approve that it went through to hand it over. And it was just chaos. It was not a fun way to spend time, and you would hope that could be done in real time and verified a different way in the future.
So this fun fact, I love AARP magazine. No, I am not of retirement age yet, nor could I, but I just think AARP is great. Anyways, I was reading something this morning about discounts and how AARP has all of these different discounts. So for those who don't know, it's the Association of Retired People. I think that's what it stands for, but it's like, yeah, it's generally for people over 65, but I still really like the content that's in it. But anyway, so I was looking at something today where I was saying there are all these different discounts and things. And I thought in my head, it'd be so cool if by the time our generation gets to retirement age, that we have this technology set up where if you apply for something like that, you can go into a restaurant and it says what the discounts are automatically. And it's all kind of recorded on chain in some way so that you can access these discounts without going into a different app for every single store. It's just recorded in your wallet, because right now, I don't know how many apps I have on my phone, but it seems like there needs to be something for every single different place that we go. So maybe by the time we actually are involved with AARP, there'll be some way to do this to be able to track our stuff. I don't know, maybe I just informed everyone of just how nerdy I really am. So, okay, we've talked about Grizz a little bit and how ticketing works in terms of music. But ticketing is also something that, well, does anyone else have anything you want to jump in about before we move to other types of ticketing? No? Okay. So ETH Denver was recently, it just happened, what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? And ETH Denver has been using NFTs and tokens and different types of blockchain applications and Ethereum applications for a long time and in many different ways. And so I think this is a good opportunity to talk about some of the innovative things they have done, at least recently, if not in the past. But Kent, since you're an East Denver steward, you were there. Do you want to walk us through some of the different things that East Denver is doing that actually uses this technology?
Yeah, sure thing, Jessica. So yeah, we just wrapped up our 7th ETH Denver. It was a blast. I bet some of you were there. Thanks for coming. So we've always been a big believer in dog fooding the tech at ETH Denver. I think it was about 4 years ago, or maybe 5. It's all a blur. Probably 4. We actually were dog fooding crypto payments with XDAI at the food truck vendors in front of the Sports Castle, our old venue. And that was a lot of fun. So back then, of course, this was pre-rollups, but there was XDAI, which became Gnosis Chain. And what we did is give attendees XDAI to spend on their food truck experiences, and in conjunction with QR codes. It's actually turned out to work out very well. Even educating the food vendors was cool. So that was kind of like an early preview of blockchain-based payments in a scalable setting, because it was on XDAI at the time. / Gnosis Chain. So kind of to your point about ticketing, what we did this year was using an app called Token Proof to generate your tickets. So much like you might get like Ticketmaster app or something, hey, you show your ticket. Token Proof is similar, but the cool thing is it's associated with a unique blockchain account. So if you just registered with an email and decided not to connect your ETH account, you still it still creates a unique account number, ETH account. And then that in turn can hold your tickets, as well as like PO apps. Everybody loves PO apps. Those are floating around. Also like special, and I saw this numerous times, special sort of benefits related to the level of ticket you had. So for example, maybe since you got a Spork whale, you get a special invite to some cool happy hour or some party or something like that. So and again, it takes all the ambiguity out of the process. It's not like, oh man, this was an unofficial ticket or this or that. And then on top of that, you kind of have that cool aspect of like, back in the day, like I'm old enough to remember like collecting ticket stubs, and I put them on my wall of my favorite concerts. And PO apps are very similar. So people collect their experiences in these wallets. So it's all integrated, and it's all using the underlying tech, which is cool, I think.
Can I jump back to what you were saying with the ETH Denver food truck? So I remember I don't know if it was 2019 or 2020, but at ETH Denver, had a wallet. I had never really gone out and in person made any kind of exchange using a cryptocurrency wallet. And I think I went out with Michael Perkland to the one of C4's co-founders to the food truck to figure out kind of how this works. And it was pretty remarkable to be able to do this for the first time at a food truck. It just felt really, it's like, this is why we're here. This is what we want to be able to do in the future. And I imagine the back end of trying to loop in the food truck people, teach them how to do it if they weren't already crypto natives, and all of the things that went into it probably was challenging. But for people that really want to experience how the tech works and to use some type of crypto, it was really, really neat. Like I can still picture what it looked like outside and then where Michael and I went and ate, because it was just such like a memorable thing to do for the first time.
That's cool. And one extra benefit on top of just the, kind of feeling like you're living the future was the fact that the vendors, once they understood what's going on, they liked it because they're saving money on credit card payments. They didn't have to pay that, 2, 3, whatever percent it is. So you can imagine that adopted on a grand scale, which I think is coming now with, scalable payment layers and apps and things that kind of abstract away some of those frictions.
That's great. There's also something to be said for the developers and the teachers in this getting to witness those pain points too. Like we make apps sometimes, but until we get to actually see them in use and see these different perspectives with them, we don't fully appreciate where things are lacking and where things can be smoothed over and improved. So actually getting to put this technology to use in such a nice fluid environment. Obviously a food truck, especially at ETH Denver, if you've been there, that turnover is fast. Like if that was a slow process, it would just be unacceptable. So it has to match credit cards as far as what that pace feels like, what that ease of use feels like, or it's just never going to get implemented. So kudos to ETH Denver for pushing that forward, getting them on board, and making them like it in the end. I think that's awesome.
It's pretty neat when you're there to, and then the next year, you know how to do it and you're helping others do it, whatever it is. And so it's a way that people start to understand how things work. And you've got community members that are helping each other figure this out. Because many of us haven't had the options, especially back then, to really pay for something in person in crypto. I'm not sure if I've told this story before, but I one time went to a restaurant. They accepted crypto. I didn't have a wallet on my phone at that time. I just had a hardware wallet. I was like, I'm coming back here just so I can do this. Went back, they no longer accepted crypto. And I was so sad that that happened. But I'm guessing it's because not enough people knew how to use it. And I think back to, oh man, I wish I'd had a wallet at that time in my phone so that I could have done it. And maybe they would have like stuck with it based on that one thing. But it is really cool that places like ETH Denver are really using the technology that we're all excited about.
They were also using, were they using NFT, or there was like a extra, not really a point system, but if you were a part of the DAO, that got you like different discounts at swag and things like that as well, wasn't there?
So this is a whole other tangent.
Oh, okay.
Cool rabbit hole. But yeah, Spork DAO is actually the nonprofit behind ETH Denver. It was created very meticulously. I actually had no part in this, but it's so cool how it worked out. It's this is kind of the really the backing organization for ETH Denver. There's Spork tokens that you can use to do things, and yeah, you can see like signing up for Spork DAO was allowed you to register for free. So that adds some cool sorts of use cases in terms of like maybe the token itself, but also we have the Buffercorn PFPs. The little ETH Denver mascot. You can purchase these, support the DAO, and I've seen cases where having those NFTs could grant you access to certain things. And the really cool thing is, I think we've only just like barely scratched the surface in terms of what's possible here. I mean, who doesn't love these little characters? A guy named Sergio is the one who really came up with this this grand design space of these cute characters. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to this.
Sorry, I got distracted with the cuteness of the little animals. It's like zoning in a bit on it. But yeah, it's really cool how we see our community coming together to use the technology. And so, Dustin, I think you have another example, another use case that you wanted to talk about in terms of how it's being used currently.
Yeah, I do. It's not being used currently. So I think it was used, I think during DevCon 2, it was used in DevCon Prague. It's something called Kickback. So it essentially was something that allowed so as an event organizer, one of the biggest problems is getting people to show up. So what Kickback did was that you had to put a small stake, and it wasn't a large amount, it was like $10 or something in ETH to go to the event. And if you didn't show up to the event, then what the people that did show up
It was 0.1 ETH.
0.1 ETH? Yeah.
It's a lot more.
Okay, it was 0.1 ETH in Prague. So basically you stake 0.1 ETH and then you show up, and if you show up, you get the ETH from everyone else that didn't show up. So that's
no, they didn't do that. They didn't give the ETH to everyone that wasn't show up.
So it depends. What happened was that they would allow the event organizers to go, you can use the stake to incentivize people to come in. And then if they don't show up, it can be used for the food, it can be used to give to people that show up. But basically the main idea is that it would basically incentivize users to use the currency to be able to go. And what happens is that for a crypto event, you want people that actually understand the technology to some extent, especially if you're organizing that kind of event. There are some events in Singapore where I am where literally people show up to the event to eat the free food and then they leave. So I think that if you have an event where you have to download an app and actually stake a token or stake some ETH in order to show up, then it kind of raises the bar a bit so you don't have like freeloaders coming in as well.
The Ethereum wedding crashers. Excellent.
Love it. Very cool. And the special guest you heard in the background during live stream was Karen Teo, who is also a active Ethereum community member as well. So that was fun. Okay, so anything else on these examples, or was there another one anyone wanted to go into before Sonal and I covered another example in a little more detail? No? Okay, well, let's talk beer, which I know is why everyone's here to begin with. So we had planned to each have some beer with us. This was going to be very exciting. We'll get into why we don't have beer. Maybe that is a good thing. We'll see how, I'm not sure how that would have went. But okay, we're talking about the brand Peroni Beer, which is an Italian beer. And how does this have anything to do with blockchain technology in Ethereum, you might ask? Well, Sonal, you want to start going into what Peroni decided to do after they started researching blockchain tech in 2015?
Yes. So I will add the disclaimer that the story will end with the fact that we don't quite know where they're at right now. But I think that'll get us into a good discussion on enterprises that pilot the use of blockchain and maybe some of the blockers and how they can alleviate them, or how the Ethereum ecosystem is progressing to get them to a place where adoption will be way more well-known and vast. So Peroni partnered with EY to use their ops chain technology a while ago. They first started their research in 2015 and then actually started launching and piloting in 2021. So they did quite a bit of time actually doing research on the technology. But their main focus was to use blockchain for traceability and sustainability purposes, where consumers could actually trace the origin points and all the steps along the way of all the products within a beer. So they first would use an NFT to serialize each batch of beers to show the journey from barley to bottle. And then, as you can see on screen, each beer would have a QR code that allows you to actually trace back. That's what we are hoping to do today. But we'll get there soon. But this was very well talked about, especially by like the younger generation, people talking about blockchain, and anybody who has an interest in environmental health or other aspects of wanting to know about what you're consuming. What's really cool about traceability use cases that all of you can imagine is that there's relevance for you, whether you're interested in it for environmental health or other purposes. Whether it's for knowing where batches of pills in the pharmaceutical space are coming from, things like that. It's a really prevalent and important concept. So Peroni luckily trialed it out back in the day. And since then, there are platforms that exist, like AWS has a blockchain platform. It says that Nestle is using it. We started diving into that a little, but I didn't get too far yet. So hopefully we'll report back on the current state of traceability for these companies. But yes, so this is what we would have seen if we did have a Peroni with a barcode. But most of us looked for Peronis, and if we found them, they did not have a QR code anymore, which made us sad because it didn't give us an excuse to have one on stream with you guys today. But it also, I think, showed that maybe Peroni was a little too early when adopting this technology. Not too early in the sense where it's not valuable, because their findings are beyond valuable for us to really figure out how to move past those barriers today, but too early in the sense of maybe what some of their objectives of using it as a large sustainability and marketing initiative. But with that, I mean, I want to ask the committee what your thoughts are based on what we know and don't know about this project.
Yeah, and I think the concept is just incredible to be able to see where the barley came from, like what region in Italy did this barley come from, and then what batch it became a part of, and then be able to trace it through the supply chain, how it got to where the store that you're buying it from, how it got there. So I was so excited yesterday when I went into the liquor store to look for Peroni beer, and The store owners were a little confused at what I was doing because I was going through all of the bottles. I was looking at like 6-packs, 12-packs, a case, and was trying to investigate if there was a QR code on any of these somewhere, and there wasn't. And Josh, I know you did something similar as well.
Yeah, also got some strange looks in the purchasing process of the Peroni, but was unsuccessful finding one with this tracking mechanism on it. But I was really looking forward to all of us kind of looking that up and seeing, where do the process, where are they similar in that life cycle of this beer that we were about to drink? Do we get the same batch of barley, or at least the same field, or is it the same plant? Or sometimes beers are produced on license locally from another one, so we might actually find out that Canadian Peroni is Sleeman based or something like that. So it would be neat to see how those differ. We probably wouldn't have the expertise in our tasting abilities to start discussing the differences in notes, but it would just be neat to see that. And I also imagine, like, yes, end consumer is amazing, or it's really neat technology for the end consumer to even just chat about and look up and see that. But even as things go wrong in that process, and things always go wrong in manufacturing and food. So being able to then track back and say, okay, well, why this one's off? Why is this one off? Well, let's, roll back and see, oh, well, this batch actually sat in the sun for 2 hours on shipping or something like that. So from a quality control standpoint, having all this information for the middle layers as well is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it's so cool to think in the future what could be done for things like this. Starting to think about like allergies, people that have allergies that want to be able to eat certain types of food or get certain drinks to see, is this field next to, I mean, this is unlikely, but a peanut field and you're allergic to peanuts or whatever. But generally, many of us, unless we either grow our own food or always purchase locally sourced, we have really no idea where the things that are in our food are coming from. So this idea of being able to really trace from beginning to end and see all of the different aspects of it, and to have it in a place that it can't be changed because it's on chain, is absolutely incredible. And I do think that we're going to see these use cases, especially in terms of agriculture and, like Sona was saying, supply chains in terms of prescription drugs, and we'll be able to trace exactly where it came from eventually. And that's going to be a game changer for people that actually need that information in terms of saving their, could be life-saving in some cases.
Yeah. Unfortunately, writing on chain has been historically very expensive, which, might be one of these issues that we're faced in this. If it takes even $1 a beer to put this QR code, then that's a pretty significant addition to the cost. However, maybe Dustin wants to touch on something new and exciting that dropped yesterday.
Yeah, Dencun dropped yesterday, but I think let's get into a specific example of like when writing on chain gets really expensive. So Singapore for a long time has had their education certificates issued on chain. And then you can see that this is OpenCerts. This is the project that basically gets education certifications from all of these like schools, polytechnics, and educational institutions. Their certifications are issued on chain. So if I go to the Singapore Examinations and Assessment Board, I click this and I click into the certificate store. It actually shows you Etherscan link. It shows you these transaction hashes. Now, where it gets interesting is, I believe I've been told before, and I can't confirm this, but I think the contract has like over 1 million gas. So the cost of issuing this cert on chain was $7.78. So if you look at the number of transactions that exist over here, all these that were issued 2 days ago. So you have a whole bunch of transactions here, and each costs you $7 or so. I can't imagine it during like, an NFT mint or some kind of a race condition where the chain is particularly expensive. this won't be very practical for people to use, especially if it's deployed on Ethereum L1. And I know that subsequent versions of this are looking to deploy on either sidechains like Polygon or L2s like rollup enabled L2s. So going into what we're talking about, which is Dencun just dropped yesterday, and what
Can
it's
you back
already
up real
enabled.
quick, Dustin,
Yeah.
in case anybody doesn't know what Dencun is or missed our live stream on that, which I'll put a link to, but just explain quickly what it is. This is not just a random word. I mean, it is, but what it means.
Yeah. So Dencun is the latest Ethereum upgrade, and it has a number of EIPs in it, but the one that everyone's excited about is EIP 4844. What that enables is blobs, and what blobs are is rather than storing expensive state on-chain, these are temporary blobs of data that allow you to save on primarily on L2 gas fees, because what happens is that the layer two projects will then post the transactions on chain, and the blobs stay on for as long as they need to for the validity of the transactions posted, and then after a set amount of time they are purged. So it doesn't increase the state of Ethereum, and because it doesn't increase the state of Ethereum, it can be priced differently and much cheaper. So I have an example of how much cheaper this gets. So Dencun drop, but just because Dencun drop doesn't mean that it's enabled on every chain. Optimism has enabled it, yes. I think a few minutes ago, or not a few minutes ago, early this morning, and fees went from 32 cents to fractions of a cent. So this is a real transaction that's on chain, where you can see how much the fees have reduced. What had been 32 cents is now, yeah. You need Etherscan needs to change the number of denominations they have now, because everything will just look free.
Fees have never been low enough
Yeah.
for Etherscan to show how low they've gotten. A little bit of extra context here. So I don't know if you remember, there was the merge not long ago, but the move from proof of work mining to proof of stake as the consensus mechanism for Ethereum, that process took years. And everyone was very surprised after it was done that fees didn't go down. But the point of that particular set of upgrades was never to lower fees. But everyone just thought, oh, this really big change. This is going to lower fees. This is going to be amazing. So everyone was very excited about it. And then when what they expected didn't happen, everyone got a little kind of sad. And it was still neat. It was still a technical marvel. But everyone's like, well, I thought they said fees would go down. And they never said that. So now that that's in place, though, other upgrades that are happening can start to tweak other elements too. And this is one of those first upgrades that just had such a strong impact on fees. Now we'll see if this impact on fees continues, or if other people might start using it in a way that just kind of starts sending fees back up. We'll find out. But that, Dustin, that looked like such an incredible improvement that I hope we get to all enjoy for a bit.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting now is that for the longest time, we've been telling people to get onto L2s because, that's where you'll save the most money on fees. But then the universal composability of L1 has still been so tempting. That's why there's so many transactions that still happen on L1, because the quantum of it's dollars in fees on L1, and it's tens of cents on L2. You do save some, but for some people, they value the liquidity or the composability more. Now that the savings are so much larger, it really then starts to get people thinking more about moving to L2. And then when the future upgrades ship different things like, shared sequencing and things like that, where it solves the problems of global liquidity, and then, it gets a lot more interesting because the L2 networks then start becoming a lot more usable.
Yeah, this is where it gets really cool, is to kind of project forward. So I guess one interesting analogy to use is going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and the build out of all the supporting like infrastructure, higher speed internet, with Cisco routers and all, Juniper networks and all this stuff that, kind of help provide the backbone for the internet as we know it today. The internet used to be pretty clunky and slow in the late 90s, early 2000s. But then as more of this infrastructure was deployed, all of a sudden, all sorts of use cases arose, which people didn't see coming. It's easy to forget that like back in say 2004 or whatever, nobody had, pondered, say, Facebook, maybe MySpace was just getting in it started, or it was a different time, but nobody really thought of these different use cases. I think now what's going to happen is if you take off these limits of scalability and still being able to scale in a decentralized fashion, the sky's the limit. So I bet in a couple of years, there's going to be cool apps and stuff that people haven't really necessarily thought of yet, or maybe just haven't really caught on. The future looks pretty bright, I think.
Our Peronis will be back to trackable soon enough.
In the meantime, at least we could drink the Peronis.
Yeah, absolutely. I really was excited to look at the tracing of it. Somebody put in the comments, which I think is a good point, and I should have thought to do this, but we'll reach out to EY. I think Paul Brody from EY was part of the article. He wrote something in there. So we'll reach out to ask them about what's going on with it now and see if we can give any kind of updates on it. I wish I'd thought of this sooner.
Samples. We need samples.
I love it.
We need liquidity from Peroni.
Oh, okay. So Dustin, this is great. This kind of pulls us back to when I think Josh, you brought up the merge, and now we're talking about how all of this is, not all of this, but many of the things related to this are working on fees, the fee structure to make things more reasonably priced for people who are using the Ethereum chain, which goes back to what Josh said about, I think it was Josh or Dustin, that if it's $1 per beer bottle to be able to track, that's a lot of money for one beer, and it increases the price of the product. And people like us that love cryptocurrency and Ethereum might be like, it's worth it. I'll pay an extra $1 so that I can trace this because it's so cool. But other people that aren't into it are probably like, why is there this QR code here? And they would ignore it. So I can see why the value for adding these at this time with the technology not being so widely adopted might not offset the cost of the beer or the transaction cost to put it on chain.
And I also think even if there are many people within the company, like Peroni, for example, that see value in this, whether they're technical, functional, there are lots of decision makers given the price change that would need to be made to actually deploy things on the blockchain that would change a lot in terms of expenses, and it would involve a lot of other business people who strictly see numbers as their job, which is probably a major roadblock to implement something like this. But things like the Dencun update can hopefully alleviate those concerns where the value and the potential upside and revenue and other things can be heavily balanced.
Yeah. One of the other things that we mentioned we would touch on and we haven't yet is gaming. And we don't need to go into great detail or do any specific examples. But Josh, would you be willing to just explain high level how blockchain and how Ethereum would be used within gaming? What does that even look like? Because I feel like maybe if you're not a gamer, or you are, but you're not into blockchain tech, you might not understand how the two can be coupled together.
Do we have an extra couple hours? Is this what we're doing?
High level overview.
All right. There's a number of different ways that this technology can be used in gaming. One of the more common elements is just ownership. I slogged through this castle. I fought all these minions along the way. I collected some cool loot, and then I fought the dragon, and I died 50,000 times, but I finally did it. I beat them, and I earned, the sword of magical slicing. And I put that effort into it. I put that effort in, and in the end, I got this sword, and I'm proud of this sword. And on the next castle I went through, and I used that sword, and it was amazing. But then at the end of it, I got the sword of glorious holding. And I don't really care about my magic sword anymore. So I would like to sell it because I've put all this effort into it, and there might be some other player who needs it for something. So I can then go and use the open market because I own this sword. So that kind of open market, true ownership becomes really interesting. There is, this one's a little bit, we're still waiting to see how this one, moves along, but being able to use that sword and bring that item into other games as well. Now that gets a little complicated because, what does my sword do in this other game that has no concept of what this other sword is? Or this is a racing game. Am I like racing in the sword now? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So we're still working on what that looks like as game developers, but it does open up some really fun avenues of joined universes and what that can mean between players. And then the other thing that this technology can bring, so that's owning that item, but then there's the actual game itself. If I create a game with my castles that you slog through and you earn that sword, but I as the game studio decides we're shutting down the servers, we don't really reckon it, like it's gone now. I might have that sword, but what good is it anymore? The game is gone. So being able to create games that are within these distributed environments, that way the community can not only own those items, but they can own the entire experience as well, adds a whole other element that might mean a lot to gamers. So this is what we're kind of working on in that industry. And again, I can chat about this for hours more.
Well, no, I think that was a great overview. The first thing you were talking about in terms of being able to purchase something in game, it also made me think of old school. Well, I know this is still a thing in games, but like Mario, the ding, you jump and you get a coin and it keeps adding up. And then once you get 100 coins, you get a new life. And that was in a lot of different games. And so the ability to then transfer those tokens or lives to another game, there's just so many endless possibilities to be able to use this. And when the games are interoperable like that, and you can actually, if this was the case, and you could move things from one game to another, like points or money to buy things, it's a really cool concept.
Yeah, it opens up some really interesting avenues. And again, it's not always going to all work out, but there's potentially a lot of fun and a lot of, especially on indie developers, a lot of ways to kind of help foster, oh, you liked my game, come play on my friend's game over here type thing.
Do you feel that in a certain sense, like with all games, because of the App Store lock-in, there's so much of the rent, I mean, I'll call it rent seeking, it is what it is. Basically, the App Store, just for putting your game on their platform, extracts a large amount of fees from the game developers that create all the content. Do you foresee kind of, especially with things happening in the EU courts now, where you have games that are fighting the App Stores from, disallowing them from being able to transact in-game using in-game currencies? That's the regulatory way to do it. But do you see using blockchain and having, cryptocurrency as the means of gamers transacting in-game without having to worry about App Store lock-in being a way to transition away from that?
Absolutely. I mean, our studio just completely stays away from anything apps, any App Store, Play Store, Steam. We just walk away from it because mostly, there's this fighting, there's the value extraction from what we're trying to build. We want to build value for players, but if that value is kind of sinking through the sieve into these other businesses, then that's not great for us. Also, those businesses are the gatekeepers. They can decide, actually, we don't like what you're doing, we're removing you. So you can put so much effort into making sure your game is a beautiful experience in their environment, only for them to say, you know what, this isn't going to work for us. So right now, the battle that you're talking about is between a company called Epic and Apple. And Epic, if you're unfamiliar with them, they create basically this engine that's used across the industry, something called Unreal. And it's used in pretty much any game you've ever looked at and gone, wow, that's extremely pretty. That's the Unreal Engine behind the scenes. It's an extremely popular system, and they create their own games using this engine as well. But they are literally a behemoth in the space. Like I think Disney just put like $8 billion into them or something like that, because they use the Unreal Engine in their movies to create beautiful CGI. So this is behemoth versus behemoth, Apple versus Epic. It is actually a very epic battle. And sure, as an indie game developer, we're watching this going, oh, let's see this, because Apple actually removed Epic from the App Store, removed some of their apps because they didn't like how Epic was taking fees kind of outside the Apple ecosystem. Apple, felt that they deserved more of those funds. So they're in this big legal battle about who gets what money. But me as an indie developer, we don't have this kind of clout. I can't take Apple to court and expect any of that to go well without basically having to like sell my house for 5 days of a lawyer. Like, this is just not something that we can do. So it's nice to watch this, and I'm glad someone is having this battle. But for indie developers, we need to do things a little differently. We need to kind of protect our business, because ultimately we want to build something that is accessible to people and fun. But we have to kind of, be careful for that. So I do see this technology is extremely beneficial for that. The other thing it's beneficial for as an indie studio is I don't have to pay for servers. Running servers for games can be extremely expensive. But if the Ethereum network is my servers, if the Cosmos network is my servers, then now as an indie studio, I have an ability to scale a game much bigger than what I could potentially do on my credit card and AWS account.
And do you feel like, just from my point of view, just as a gamer, like from the late 90s when games were fully delivered and it wasn't all downloadable content, you didn't get a beta that you kept playing, having to pay upgrades for. Do you see that the App Store model incentivizing, more microtransactions actually influencing what kind of games get made? Because now games have to constantly have this flow of transactions because the App Store model kind of demands that, versus a game that, has its own economy and does things differently and doesn't incentivize for what the App Store rewards them for. Do you see that shift in gaming, or do you think that it's something that you might still do as an indie studio?
I hadn't really considered that factor, but I do see it. One, if we're creating a game and distributing it to a chain, we kind of have to make sure it's a little bit more right than something that we're going to upgrade over and over and over again, because we're putting it in this immutable system. So we don't really have like, oh, we'll just keep pushing updates. We might push updates to the interfaces that read that data, but ultimately the game logic that we're trying to build on chain is a little bit more difficult to change. We need either buy-in from the community.
And that's the intention, right? That's actually what you want. You don't want to like rug people with the game dynamics halfway.
Exactly. So although I hadn't really considered that as far as like selling full products off the bat rather than going back to this, piecemeal model, that's certainly something that we have to do. We have to create something that's good and timeless kind of off the bat. The other thing, we can build in these kind of microtransactions. Oh, you want cosmetics. I want a cool hat, or I want my robot to be gold, not silver. We can build in those cosmetics into games, but we don't necessarily do it as we have the ability to sell these cosmetics and you don't. It's more about creating a community where anyone who wants to build cool cosmetics for the game can, within that same framework. And if I like, some other artist's cosmetics more than my studio's cosmetics, that's great. Like, I'm glad we fostered that. So I think there's still elements for those kind of microtransaction expansions in the game, but I think it's more about creating a more interesting and full marketplace that's just beyond what one studio's recommendation or vision and monopoly is on those items.
It's a more equitable way for like user-generated content to kind of like get value to the people that created it versus it all accruing to the platform that hosts it.
Exactly.
So what's funny is we started this conversation talking about something totally different about an hour ago, and it kind of brings us all full circle to say, like, what do Peroni, Grizz, and ticketing, ETH Denver, and Spork DAO, and gaming have in common? And that is Ethereum and blockchain technology. And Sonal, I know you wanted to mention something about this, because it's easy to just be like, this is all over the place, but it's not. It's all about Ethereum. So do you want to jump in?
Yes. So listening to Josh speak made me realize how the lingo is so different in each industry. He was talking about slaying dragons and dying 50,000 times. And that's not something I typically hear in my day. I'm talking about like ERP processes, which is obviously way more boring. But I think it's so interesting because the blockchain tech can be used across all these different verticals. And this group here is a sample size of the Ethereum community. And it shows the diverse backgrounds and interests that bring people together in our ecosystem. And the problems we're trying to solve with this tech, whether it's for gaming or supply chain, they follow the same patterns that are around retaining ownership, removing gatekeepers, and the general tenets of Ethereum, which is so cool because I understand what Josh is talking about, even though it's a different world that I'm in. And I believe everyone in this group understands what I'm talking about, even though it's completely different, because you can just easily pick up these patterns of the problems we're solving. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this tech. And we see it in all of our everyday lives as we're talking to people outside of the ecosystem and explaining it to them. If someone says they're in healthcare, if you've been in the space long enough, or if you're interested in it, you quickly start to learn how to apply use cases to learn how to apply their use case to the patterns of these problems to quickly make it understandable. And it's pretty easy to click with people. So I just thought that was funny and interesting.
It definitely is. And it really speaks to why it's so important for C4's committees to have people who have such different backgrounds. And, Kent was the tokenomics workstream leader at Shapeshift DAO, and that is totally different than my wheelhouse, yet we're here together talking about the same technology. And it's very different than what you do, Sonal, supply chain. And it's just fun to see how all of these very seemingly disparate topics are actually all related through something like blockchain tech and through Ethereum. It's pretty cool.
I have one last thing to add. Like I've just checked out L2Beat, which is the best website for checking out all information on L2s, and they've added a new tab for data availability. So now you can see among all the L2 chains, which chain has blobs or call data and whether their data availability is enshrined, which is a subject for another live stream, I think. But basically, yeah, you've got basically a new thing that addresses blobs within L2Beat.
Cool. And yeah,
I did not understand most of that, so I think we do need another live stream.
I was just about to say, and if you don't know what blobs are or call data or what he is referencing, head back to the Ethereum upgrades live streams, where I think it'll give you a good idea of what leads into this. But I agree, if we're going to, I don't know what enshrined means. If we're going to talk about any of this in more detail, yeah, we definitely need to do that on a different stream. But this just like speaks to what we were just saying about how vast this ecosystem is. It's not just in one area, it encompasses so many different things. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, another related point, and this is a totally different rabbit hole, but with respect to the DA stuff, and you also see a risk analysis tab on L2Beat. We talked earlier about how the rollups are scalable and decentralized, but there's a lot of nuance there. They're not yet sort of maximally decentralized, certainly not as decentralized and maybe risk-free as the Ethereum mainnet. The reason is, there's still what you call these sequencers, what's sort of processing blocks on these chains. There's elements of centralization. Sometimes there's multi-sigs. So it is an important caveat here that this isn't the end state of the rollups. There's still cases where if something were to go wrong, users' funds could get frozen. So there's work to be done, but yeah, I guess that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, it's very easy to mention one thing and then go down quite the rabbit hole or can of worms, like you said, with this. And we're actually almost out of time. So what I think we should just kind of say as the takeaway is that when we started coming together to discuss what the topic of this live stream would be, Ethereum in action, we started to come up with use cases. We realized there are a ton of different use cases, real estate, supply chain, just many, many things. But many of them are still in, the beginning stages, parts of, it's the conception, or it's being explored, but it's not public yet, what's exactly happening. Or like Peroni, it happened, but we don't have the QR codes here. I don't have it in Chicago, but they might be somewhere else. We're not sure. But so there's so many different things in flux, and it's just an incredible technology. And it's pretty incredible that at where we're at right now in 10 years, when we're on a new live stream about this and we do something with use cases, it's going to be vastly different. And it's just, there's going to be so many different things that are happening that are using Ethereum. So it's amazing.
For those of you who remember your internet history, we are the pets.com stage of internet adoption, where it's just stuff that that went online that didn't need to be online. So there's still many projects that don't need a blockchain, but then among those there will be an Amazon. Among all the pets.coms, there will be something that is building that is important, that will be a basis from which a lot of other stuff will be built.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for lending us your thoughts, ideas, and sharing with our community about this. Appreciate it. And we will see you next time. So thank you.
Bye,
Thanks
guys.
for watching.